In this episode of ICS Connects, I'm talking to Tyson Villeneuve, and we talk about social engagement in the time of virtual meetings and virtual events. So listen in and let's explore the future of exchange. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ICS Connects. I'm here today with Tyson Villeneuve, the co-founder and partner at the Social Concierge. And welcome to ICS Connects, Tyson.
Thanks so much for having me, Matthias. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tyson, do you want to introduce yourself and your company a little bit to our listeners?
Yeah, so my name is Tyson Villeneuve. I'm a co-founder and partner in the Social Concierge, as obviously Matthias just opened with. But we're an experiential brand and marketing agency that specializes in events. We're also a hybrid agency because we create and brand and own a bunch of our own festivals. And then we also, on the flip side, have client projects as well. And we engage in both layers. And so it's been a lot of fun, but we're about 10 years old so far and now have been adapting quite readily into the virtual sphere and this new normal that we live in.
So what you just mentioned, social engagement and getting people together in some social event capacity, that's certainly something that is tough to do right now and definitely tough to do virtually. And the reason why I feel it's going to be very interesting for our audience is that that's one of the things that I feel we're all struggling with when we manage online events, online conferences. The networking and the social events aspect of it has really taken a hit. So hopefully we can take some pointers from you today. So I was wondering, tell us a little bit about some of your, or maybe a couple of your events that you've run virtually now that were originally online. What kind of events are those, and how did your first one go, basically?
Yeah, no, well, I think for an example, I'm going to talk about Candlelight Club, which is an event that we own, that we launched in real life, in person, and ran successfully for 2.5 years pre-COVID and sold out every edition. It started on Earth Day back in 2013, and it was fantastic. And that was an event that we wanted to readily adapt. It was our first brand concept that we adapted right back at the beginning of the pandemic for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day back on April 22nd. And we felt that it was the most easily or readily adaptable concept in our event portfolio, that as we were pivoting and experimenting into virtual, because of the candlelighting component of it. Because it had a layer of interactivity that was simple for people to understand and engage with as a core foundation of something that, you know, was pre-existing in another event that we could have people do and engage with at home, because effectively it was a dinner event. And interactivity was a key component to making it popular as it was. And we thought that would be a great place to start.
Yeah. So when you started that, and that was in April, that was very quickly after the pandemic started. So you didn't have a whole lot of time to get it all underway. What were some of your key learnings from that first time you've done it? So what were some of the things that you feel you've done really well? And what are maybe some of the things that didn't work that well the first time around?
Well, I think what's really important to know is that, you know, virtual events is an emerging industry. And it's like, I think, a $76 billion a year industry globally right now that's supposed to 10x in the next 5 years because of COVID. So it's already a prominent industry that's actually going to be growing immensely. People are going to have to move virtual. I was actually reading an article recently that's saying live events are having their Napster moment, so to speak, in terms of people in the entire events industry are being forced online, whether they like it or not. And it's going to be the companies and the brands that adapt quickly to this new virtual sphere that will survive and will do well. But taking that step is not always easy, and there was no sort of roadmap for us to follow. So when we launched that first Candlelight Club, we had to figure out a lot of the things from our you know, our own perspective and our own experience. We only had 3.5 weeks to put it together. Selling sponsorship in early stages of pandemic was an extraordinary challenge, but it's something that, you know, need to be cognizant of. So I think that's something that kind of goes without saying these days in the pandemic is, you know, make sure you know your audience, know who you're speaking to, and what their level of sensitivity is and what their level of brand sensitivity is in terms of like partnerships and engagement. But the good news is about virtual is that it is basically the only COVID-proof event that you can throw for thousands of people or hundreds of people. And that's going to be the state for at least the next couple of years.
So you've redone the Candlelight Club just a couple months ago in August, and there were probably some learnings from the first to the second. What were some of the let's talk about the second Candlelight Club. What were some of the key ingredients that you would say made it a successful and engaging event? How were you able to engage an audience in a virtual environment?
Well, I think what to answer your question as well in regards to the key learnings from the first Candlelight Club actually forced the evolution of into the second Candlelight Club. And we needed when we did the first one, it was again at the beginning of the pandemic, so it was broadcast focused. And that's the way that most people understand virtual events, is they're watching a broadcast. They're watching either a show or an engagement or a Zoom chat, but it's something visual that is being shown at you, right? And, a lot of thought leadership talks, conferences, everything, those are broadcast content. And that's the first core element of any good virtual event. But everybody's figured that out now. And people also, from an interactivity standpoint, are getting really over Zoom. They're getting over these video chat formats because a lot of people have to do it all day for work. And it's not as exciting as it was anymore. The first few months, everybody's like, okay, cool, we can Zoom back and forth with each other in large groups, and we can, watch this broadcast. And I'm so interested in what's going on at the same time.
So true.
But people got over that quickly. And so we knew that, and how quickly they got over it was actually quite shocking and impressive, because we knew that within 6 weeks of doing our first Candlelight Club, which was a broadcast Zoom and very interactive that way, and it was very, very successful. We had just over 1,200 people enjoying candlelight dinner with basically like a week of promotion, which was phenomenal. And the feedback was super strong. But even within 6 weeks, everybody was already asking us, well, what's the next thing? Because they were already over the Zoom. And so as a creative event agency that was at the time going, okay, great, well, we've just done a great one, can we do it again? But we realized if we did the same thing that we'd done already, it would have been too late. It wouldn't have been engaging enough, and we would have lost an audience. So part of our key learnings is making shorter, tighter content, making things that are super interactive and engaging, and really making sure that that interactivity layer is a sticky feature of the event. And that's what propelled us into Candlelight Club 2 by starting to collaborate with some different companies and interactive virtual event-based platforms based out of San Francisco. And we adopted those into our event program, and the feedback was even stronger. So that's something but a lot of those integrations and adaptations came out of the feedback of the first one.
So tell us a little bit about some of those activations and those networking and engagement tools that you had the second time, or platforms that you used. What were some of those that you think could be used on a broader kind of basis as well?
Yeah, well, this is something that you're going to want to look for in virtual events in general. This is a very emerging industry. So when a lot of companies, and ourselves included, we're looking for a turnkey solution on that extra meat and sauce to interactivity beyond just a conversation back and forth. How do you recreate that organic networking feel? And there are companies out there that are launching what are basically virtual digital event spaces that you can then design and program with your own content and use their theater as a backdrop, so to speak. And once you can understand how to work within those technologies and those spaces from all these new companies, you can learn how to add and integrate more messaging. You can drop in like links, you can drop in video content, you can drop in live Zoom chats, you can drop in educational content, you can hyperlink to anything, and then graphic design on top of it. And so these types of companies, and there are numerous out there right now. We worked with High Fidelity on our first one for Candlelight Club. We're working with another company right now as well called Topia on a different project. These are phenomenal creative tech companies that are pushing the boundaries of that interactive layer. And High Fidelity is based on audio proximity, which means that as you organically move through the event space and you get closer to somebody, the sound will get louder. So you can literally walk up to avatars and have a conversation, which really echoes that organic feel of networking. And then if you want the more video component as well, that there's other platforms out there that are both audio and video proximity, which means that as you move your avatar through the virtual event space, your screen will slowly fade into view as you approach somebody else. And it's these types of technologies that are adding that extra layer that both sponsors are looking for and guests, because it keeps them on longer and it keeps them on in a really engaging and memorable fashion.
So you mentioned avatar. Is that usually the way it goes? Like for an event like that, people would create their own avatar in order to do these engagements. Is this the only way you've experienced it so far, or is this the usual way to go?
Well, I think before I can answer that question, I think it's important to understand like the commonality usage of the term avatar. Right. Yeah. So in virtual events, and virtual events are becoming many different things, but they're way more than a Zoom call. But you also don't need a VR helmet for them. And, it's like disappearing for 3 hours into a whole other world. But an avatar is basically a representation of your digital self. So in high fidelity, it's a dot. It's literally a dot on a map, like the "you are here" dots in a shopping mall map that you would see as a site plan. So that the way that high fidelity works is you can actually custom design a site map to anything, and all of the avatars, how you would interact, are actually represented by dots moving around the screen. And you can control your dot, but each dot is actually, you put up a profile picture, you type in a name, and that's it. No login, no password, you're straight into the space. Other avatars, like the ones on Topia, are actually more pencil sketch style. It looks like a bit of a journal journey. So each of these types of programs have their own avatar styles, but an avatar doesn't necessarily need to be like a big computer animated generated thing. It can literally be a dot on a screen that you move around. It's a representation of how you navigate the virtual event space.
And based on that, so if I move around the virtual event space and I start networking or talking to other people, is it fairly random in a way, kind of who I talk to? Like I end up talking to Tyson, or do you have some sort of a way how I can meet people that I would maybe be interested in meeting? There's some commonality, or we have a problem that we want to discuss, or you're more on the social side, so maybe we have things that we both have an interest in.
Yeah. And I think, well, this is one of the parts that is actually really exciting about virtual events once you wrap your head around it, is that, in a virtual event space, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can imagine. So for Candlelight Club, for a high fidelity, on our map, I custom graphic design with an illustrator and a graphic designer, an entire virtual event space as I imagined it. So we used the floor plan actually from the Roxy, adapted a whole bunch of things, created a botanical garden outside, a nice terrace, and then integrated brand sponsors and logos and activations. So we actually created this full space that looked like you could actually walk into an event. So when you're moving your avatars around, you can go, oh, hey, come meet me over by the bar. Let's go chat over there. And you can actually have your private conversations, which is really cool. And because you can actually have the entire screen up, and it's fully integrated with the broadcast as well, so you can actually be watching the entertainment and listening to it while you're moving around through this map, through this interactive site plan, you can completely organically move around. You can lose people, you can run into people, you can bump into people. If you don't like a conversation that you have, you can mute people, you can just decide to leave. So a lot of these companies are creating these unique features that people look for that would echo walking through a conference room hall, like bumping into people, going to different trade show booths. You can graphically design now a full graphically designed conference center with booths and have different brands at each booth, except instead of being there in person, you're moving your avatar around, but you still have those engaging conversations. And it's completely random as long as somebody's there on the other end to have a conversation with you. I popped into a Topia just at random for a demo, and I ran into a guy from New Jersey, and we just completely ended up hanging out and having a 15-minute conversation. Super interesting person about architecture. So there's a lot of great randomness that comes with these interactive components as well.
Quite interesting. Would you usually brand these areas in a way that they cover some sort of a common interest area, or that people that go in, they know what kind of people they would meet in this area, or you kept it completely random?
I kept it completely random, but everything was
Hmm.
so well branded. We have like a mix of people because we run social events. So we like
Hmm.
having as diverse of a crowd as possible. But you could also tell where there were different groups of people that just kind of naturally hovered. It's very funny to me, the psychology, the human psychology that flows through even on a virtual event. You can move your avatar anywhere, but people were still putting their avatar and parking in front of the virtual stage to listen to the concert when they could still be moving around anywhere. They're sitting in front of their computer, but they were like, no, I want to put my avatar in front of the virtual stage to listen to the concert. And there were also a lot of great cocktail mixologists and hospitality industry people that happened to gather at the virtual bar, which was really cool. So you have all of these mechanisms of gathering that are just natural, that you can brand or create, and you can create your own spaces. And that's the cool part, is you can really make them anything. You can brand a whole area with either a sponsor or as however you would design it, and then just kind of in the home package or in the lead up, which is really, in my opinion, the third key pillar of a great virtual event. The first being the broadcast, the second being the interactivity, but the third key part is how that lines up for the at-home experience, because obviously you want to try to keep things interactive and engaging at home as well for your guests during the event. So a lot of people are sending out interactive meal boxes, cocktail kits, wine, champagne, that type of stuff. Those dinner boxes are very common now, but people are also starting to step it up in terms of adding interactive elements, quizzes, engagement things that you need to get in your paper, on paper in your box, but questionnaires that you virtually fill out. There's all these fun things that you can do from contests and interactivity, and that at-home component is really, really important as well in terms of how you can also delineate areas of people to gather in.
I guess it's quite important, especially if you look at, not everybody's an extrovert, and especially when we look at conferences and we want to get people engaged in networking. You probably deal with some people that are not that comfortable just bumping into people and starting random conversations.
Hmm.
So, what are some of the tools that you have? You mentioned quizzes and so on. Are those the main tools you have to engage people that might not be as comfortable just randomly starting conversations?
No, no, no. I think from an engagement standpoint, you can really do anything. But what I've actually found is that a lot of people actually like to watch, and some people very rarely like to engage. And
Mm.
what's cool is because a lot of, as I was mentioning earlier, say for brands or sponsors, say for example, I custom created the Botanist cocktail bar. And I graphic designed it in a beautiful garden terrace that we graphic designed, and put the Botanist Gin logo on it because they were one of our sponsor partners for Candlelight Club. And we went in and pre-recorded the brand ambassador making the actual Botanist cocktail that was featured, that people were also getting delivered at home, but there was a beautiful video. And some people just wanted to go watch all the videos because the video links were embedded at the bar. So if you walk over to the bar in the virtual event space and click on the Botanist logo, it takes you to the highlight video of their mixologist teaching you how to make the drinks.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different engagement. We did a little Ask Me Anything component. We actually had somebody live with one of the Roxy bartenders. You just kind of come up and ask me anything, and he's sitting there just like you on the other end of the Zoom room. You could just click into the Zoom and ask any questions you wanted. So there's these fun little things that you can do that are pockets of engagement to keep people entertained, beyond obviously quizzes and things like that. But the key thing that's actually keeping people engaged is the broadcast, right? So there's always a broadcast component. So whether or not they're watching a talk or a live music performance that's on the screen or something like that, that's always up in the background. And so some people actually just like to enjoy that background and watch, and they don't want to be disturbed. So what we decided to do as a key learning from Candlelight Club 1 to Candlelight Club 2 is we actually custom graphic designed a little lounge area where you could kind of park your avatar. And if you were in that listening lounge, that meant you just wanted to chill out and watch, and nobody was going to come up and bother you. So there's all these cool things that you can kind of adapt around that. And the more that people get engaged in virtual events in general, the more these types of solutions are going to become more commonplace. But right now, there's still a lot of these brands, a lot of these emerging companies and technologies are still in beta. They're all like, a lot of them are launching for the first time. So you're going to see a ton of them coming out in the next 6 to 8 months as solutions. And I think, as an event producer, I'm starting to learn how to adapt what we already do in real life into the virtual sphere. But now that I've been doing it, I'm also learning that there's a lot of amazing benefits to going virtual as well. And especially now that these newer technologies are there, where the part that was missing, the part that people keep complaining about virtual events, is that lack of randomness and interactivity and networking, and how to keep people engaged for more than 5 hours. And I think that a lot of these types of technologies are going to be solving those problems.
So let's talk about technology quickly. How do you find the right platforms? Like, how did you go out there to really? How did you even know what you were looking for in a way? Right. This is so new that sometimes we have an idea of what we might want, but we probably need to keep our eyes and our minds quite open for things that are out there that we don't even know existed or could exist. So how do you go about finding the right platform, or how did you go about that?
Well, I didn't personally find it. My business partner found it, but he spent probably about 200 to 300 hours over quite a bit of time demoing almost every single platform that he could get his hands on. And now he's actually way up into the high upper echelons of like demos with like these super emerging platforms. But I think, at the end, we actually didn't know when he started on this journey looking for a platform, because that was a lot of the feedback from our sponsors and our guests was, okay, we loved it, but how do you make it even more interactive? How do you Zoom room hop? How do I see what other people are doing? How do I get stronger brand messaging out? So we basically started looking for a platform that could help us answer those questions for our sponsors. And we just couldn't find one for the longest time until we stumbled across these few. And now they're starting to emerge a bit more. But there's definitely to find them, you just have to search them out. It's not that it's like there's no big brands that are doing this right now that are very I think the ones that are the most interesting are the really creative spheres. So the people who follow Burning Man, the whole Burning Man community is heavily into this. There's all these, and these are these types of technologies that are super interesting, very adaptable, and they're designed for creative minds to take the technology and adapt their aesthetic to it, instead of trying to make something that's so beautiful and over the top. But nobody could ever recreate that unless you're spending millions of dollars, right? Like I'm sure you've seen like the DC ones. The DC Comics one was a massive, massive success. Tomorrowland went virtual with like 2 million people watching it or something like that. And these are massive event brands that have huge budgets in the millions of dollars to do these crazy over the top virtual experiences with heavy computer animation and all these things and celebrities and everything. But most people don't have that. So the types of technologies that I'm talking about are ones that can elevate your game in virtual, but are not going to be at that crazy, crazy expensive level. And a lot of those technologies didn't really exist while we were trying to figure them out. So we actually had to stumble across them.
Yeah. Did you feel you had to integrate several ones together, or were you able to just stick with one platform in the end?
You just stick with one, I think, is the best way to do it. But we have multiple event brands. And so we actually have found the platform that best suits the style or the narrative and the purpose of the event. I think that if you're going to be doing something that's more business focused, that's more about either a conference or a social event that's more about networking, I would highly recommend the High Fidelity, which is the platform that we use for Candlelight Club, because you're moving around in a visual dot. You're engaged on the screen. You can graphic design it like anything, but it's audio proximity based. And because you can't see anybody when you're talking to them, it's really cool because you could theoretically be in your pajamas and nobody would know. But at the same time, you can network through the room. But because there's no video, I find that the interactions are shorter. If you have that video proximity content that, say, for example, Topia has, the interactivity stays longer because it's harder for you to walk away from somebody, even as an avatar, if you're looking at them in the face. And if you're not, and if you're just doing it based audio, you're like, oh, okay, cool, see you later, I got to go over here, right? And there's less formality to it. So depending on the level and speed of engagement, you can even think about those types of layers and what platform might be best suited for you.
So how many people did you have attend the second Candlelight Club?
So we had 500 people across the country over the course of in and out, checking out our space, which was amazing. And we were trying to basically just show people what is possible within the virtual event sphere, because this is something that people had never experienced before. So as much as we were super excited to share that with people, everybody, we were so excited for everybody's feedback and thoughts, and I loved how long people were engaged, and we actually had a setup map. We had moderators so when people click through, we had a moderator that welcomed them in an actual sort of welcome lounge map that was separate from our virtual event space. And so we taught people how to use the program for about 5 minutes, and then we put them in the virtual event space. But a lot of people, when we were there, walking, just showing up and going, wow, this is so different. And, oh my gosh, where are you? And can you hear me? There's the typical just looking for their friends and exploring the technology kind of thing. But once they got into it, people stuck around for a while. And I think that that's the part that's really, really important about these platforms, is that if you take a bird's eye view back from a business perspective, it's through these platforms that you can retain engagement of people, because attention spans are so short, and they're getting even shorter with all the constant news and everything else being bombarded at them. It's really hard to keep somebody on a virtual platform for 4 hours straight if they're not engaged and entertained. And these platforms we're finding that people can spend 45 minutes on it without even blinking an eye, and then next thing you know, 3 hours later, and they're having a wonderful time. So and that's something that most people can't say right now about virtual events. And so that's why I'm confident in this industry moving forward, because of these cool platforms that are emerging that allow for creative space.
It sounds like you're so into this. Will you ever go back to live events?
Oh yeah, I would go back tomorrow. Good. We do both because I'm actually super into these. I'm way more into virtual events than I ever thought I would be. But obviously, we love what we do. We love people first and foremost. I mean, everybody at ICS, everybody in events in general, we do what we do because we love engaging and communicating with people.
That is correct. And you mentioned the Napster moment at the very beginning of this conversation, and I really feel it's a good example, but it's also, I want to let people kind of assure them that there is always, with Napster, and this is about music, people still go to live concerts, and live concerts are still popular, and maybe more popular than ever. And there's more music festivals than there ever were before. We can live together. We can coexist, and events can do that the same way. There can be great virtual events, and they might spark some live events, and it might get people to appreciate live events maybe a little bit more, and it gives them a bit of a flavor of to say hey, I actually would like to really meet people, not just as a dot on a screen, but live, face to face as well. And therefore kind of we can coexist quite nicely, and our industry can grow in both areas, hopefully in the future.
I 100% agree. I think that no matter what happens, there will be a lot of elements of tech and virtual that will be integrated back into real live events after this. But there is nothing that can replace that human connectivity. And even after doing virtual events for 6 months now, I still get that electric vibe when you just walk into a room. There's nothing that matches that. But when understanding though that we are in the world of COVID, and we are in the world of virtual events right now. So if we're going to be playing in that world, no matter where it goes, let's make sure that we all understand the world that we're playing in. Absolutely.
And that's perfect kind of final words to leave it on. Tyson, this was so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I know lots of us are struggling with keeping people engaged, and I hope we took some very good pointers out of this. And I'll definitely check out the platforms, High Fidelity, that you mentioned. I'm quite interested. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Matthias. Appreciate it.
And thank you everyone for listening. Bye-bye.